In my Devar Torah, I talked about what does it look like when a ritual, a practice that goes back thousands of years that we've carried on for no apparent reason comes back to life, and we find a new meaning in it. I tried to suggest what that might be about with the ancient, obsolete ritual of the purification by the ashes of the red heifer. Our guest today, Aaron Lansky, essentially embodies a profound revival of an ancient custom or religion, or of the language rather, that was considered dead, the language of Yiddish. So Aaron Lansky is the founder of the National Yiddish Book Center, and his story is a remarkable story. If you had the chance to read his book, Outwitting History, it tells the story of him as a young man hearing about maybe 70,000 or so Yiddish books around, and he decided to rescue these books that were being thrown into the trash heap. And since that time and the founding of the National Yiddish Book Center, they've recovered 1.5 million books. But even more importantly than that, the National Yiddish Book Center, if you've not visited there on the campus of Amherst College in Springfield, Massachusetts, Hampshire College. Hampshire College, is it in Amherst? Okay, Hampshire College and Amherst. All those things are in the same area, you know, it's easy to confuse, you know? If you have the opportunity to visit there, you'll go there and see it's not a museum to a dead language. What Aaron has created with his staff is essentially an entire revival, not only of the Yiddish language, but of an entire culture from Europe that was thought to be on the dustbin of history. And he did that single-handedly in building a staff and a movement, quite a legacy. Some of you know that he just recently announced his retirement. There's kind of an epidemic of that happening among us boomers, Aaron. What's going on here? A lot of retirements happening all around us, but he was featured on the front page of the New York Times with his story. He was also honored some years ago with the MacArthur Genius Award for his work of reviving Yiddish language and culture. And we're honored to have him here as our guest this morning for Shabbat Voices. Aaron, welcome to Adat Shalom with you and your family. It's great to have you here. His talk will be how he rescued 1 million Yiddish books and why they matter.
Well, good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom. So before I begin, I want to start with the thank yous. And I want to say first to Jesse Abraham, who made all this possible. Jesse, where are you? Thank you very, very much for doing this. And also 2 other board members who are here, Nina Shore and Rhea Schwartz as well. And I want to thank them for being here today. Rhea in the back, thank you. And I'd be really, really remiss if I didn't thank my family who came with me. And that's my wife, Gail, and our daughter, Sasha, who lives in D.C. when she's not deployed to Somalia and other such places, working for USAID, distributing American food aid overseas. And we worry about her all the time, but we're enormously proud of her, Sasha. Thanks for being here today. So, I'm actually giving 2 talks today, now and then again after lunch. And it's going to be a little bit tricky because I have to give both of these, as we say, al regalachas, while standing on one foot, because I'm told time is of the essence. So I'm going to start out this morning by telling you the story of the Yiddish Book Center itself and how we came to save all these books and what we found along the way. And then this afternoon to talk about a single writer, Isaac Bashevis Singer, the only Yiddish writer to win the Nobel Prize in Literature, and in some ways one of the most perplexing and challenging of all Yiddish writers. So in 1980, I was a graduate student studying with Ruth Weiss at McGill University in Montreal. I loved graduate school. This was Canada, keep in mind. So the tuition was $300 a year at a time when Columbia was $30,000. And we were in a very rich, that is to say, a culturally rich Jewish community in Montreal, a much more recent immigration where Yiddish was still very widely spoken in the late 1970s. I taught at a Jewish school which was quadrilingual, meaning English, French, Hebrew, and Yiddish. There was a Jewish public library that was actually became quintilingual because they added Russian as well for the more recent immigrants. So it was an extraordinary community, and I was on my way to a very, what I thought would be a very comfortable career, when I ran into a problem that there weren't enough books to read. So every week, Ruth would assign a different book for us to read, and we'd there were 4 of us. We'd race off after class, and one of them would go to the Jewish public library, and the others of us had to go to Jewish neighborhoods and ring on doorbells and borrow the books we needed, but we could always find them. And then somewhere along the way, I became aware of the fact that studies of Yiddish were growing almost exponentially at that point. This was a subject that had largely been overlooked in the mainstream Jewish community, and suddenly young people were wanting to understand, again, who Jews are as a people and what we had been doing for the several thousand years since today's Torah portion and where we ended up. And so I went to Ruth, and I found out more and more that books were being tossed out as an older generation passed on. And with her blessing, I went off and took what I thought would be a 2-year leave of absence from graduate school to save the world's Yiddish books. It was too hard to do it in Montreal because the French nationalism had just gotten up steam, and so I decided to come back to the States. I went to Amherst, where I had studied as an undergraduate, and I started an organization, and I sent out press releases. This is before personal computers, so I sent out press releases on an old IBM Selectric typewriter, and I mailed them to every newspaper in America. I had scribbled all the names down at the library. And before I knew it, the news started to spread. And with the news came this deluge of books. But with the deluge also came letters from older Jews who would write in very scratchy Yiddish handwriting, sometimes on penny postcards that arrived postage due. And they would, and they'd say, I have many, many Yiddish books here that I would be very happy to give to you, but I'm very old, and you got to come quickly. So I set out on the road. When I first set out, I traveled alone, and then I quickly learned to always travel with 2 other people, because we had everyone we went to see, everyone. I must have gone to 3,000 separate houses. What do you think you had to do at every house you went to? Well, first you had to drink the hot tea out of a glass. Then you got to eat when the Entenmann cakes came out of the boxes and the Luxon cocoa came out of the oven and everything they had cooked for you. And then they sat me down at the table to speak to me in Yiddish to make sure I was worthy. And then they would try to arrange a shidduch with one of their granddaughters. And then they would hand us the books kind of 1 volume at a time. So that went on for some number of months, and I was on the road. I'd come home for Shabbat, otherwise I was on the road 6 days a week, 16-hour days doing this. When you're young, you can do anything. And I loved it. It was really fun. One night, though, I was home, and it was after midnight, and the phone started ringing. I was living in a communal house with a bunch of friends. It wasn't surprising to get a phone call late at night. Remember back in those days, the phone rates used to go down at 11 o'clock at night? Every Jew in America waited till after 11 to call me. But this wasn't after 11, this is after midnight. And I decided I wasn't going to answer. I was exhausted, and it's snowing outside. And one of my housemates said, Aaron, you got to take this call. So I kind of stumbled out of bed and wrapped the blanket around myself and went to the phone. It was a friend of mine in New York who said they had just found a garbage dumpster on 16th Street in New York. And he said it was overflowing with what appeared to be Yiddish books, and I had to get there right away. Well, I was about to say, back then, we had 1 train a day from our area to New York City. We still have 1 train a day to New York City, but all right, we won't go there. It used to go, though, at 2 o'clock in the morning. But I had to get to the train station, and that wasn't so easy either. None of my housemates had a car, but I had an old pickup truck, a 63 Ford pickup truck that I had used years before when I was selling firewood when I first got out of high school, and it was parked behind our house, and it hadn't run in over a year, but I was desperate. And I thought maybe Mina Shemayim, somehow from heaven this miracle would happen. So I went out to the truck, and I turned, and I pulled out the choke. It was really old. And I turned the ignition, and somehow, miraculously, it kind of shuddered to life like the phoenix, And so I got and then there was no sticker on it, to show that it was currently registered. So we took snow and pine needles and put it where the sticker would have been. And I drove to the train station. I made it just in time. I paid for the ticket. I went to sleep. The conductor woke me up in New York. I ran out on the street, and it had been snowing in Massachusetts. In New York, it was like sleet and freezing rain. And when you run out of the train station at Penn Station, and you look across 8th Avenue, what's the building you see? You know this. The post office, right now the Moynihan Train Hall. And does anyone remember the inscription on the post office? What's it say? That's generally it, yes. Yeah, neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stays these couriers and so forth. I thought that was really, it comes from Herodotus, by the way, in case you're wondering. But I thought that was really fitting. So I rushed downtown to 16th Street, and there's a dumpster, but not the kind I was expecting. It's this great big kind of tractor-trailer-sized dumpster, and sure enough, there are books, Jewish books, lying splayed out on the road, and cars are driving over them. And I said, what are we going to do? How can I deal with this? So I quickly went to before cell phones, quickly went to the payphone on the corner. I called up every friend I knew. Within a half hour, there were 7 or 8 of us there. We pooled our money. We went and rented the biggest U-Haul truck you could get in those days, and backed it up to the dumpster, spent the entire day hauling books out of the dumpster in the rain, incredibly valuable volumes. We were all soaked to the skin. In the meantime, the book covers were running in the rain, because the dyes were not very good. So the covers were running, so we ended up looking like harlequins out there, we're just mottled red and blue and green. And what I have to tell you is, I'm telling you this story, there are 100 stories like this. I'm telling you this particular one only because it's dramatic, and also because there was a certain significance to it. Because remember that day in the rain? The whole time we're working, I kept looking over my shoulder. And why was I looking over my shoulder? Because I expected that at any moment the grown-ups were going to show up. The Kanakas, the big machas from the big Jewish organizations were going to show up, and they were going to take over. Why in the world were they leaving this to 23 and 24-year-old kids to go save a literature that they themselves had ignored and discarded and neglected? They never came, but we got really good at what we were doing. We saved about 6,000 books that day. 2,000 volumes were kind of floating in this fetid pool at the bottom of the dumpster beyond repair at that point. And as Sid told you, we went on to save about 1.5 million volumes. So it's been an extraordinary journal in every possible way. It's a little misleading, though, to tell you that we got all the books out of dumpsters and abandoned buildings and demolition sites. We did plenty of that. But the newspapers wrote about all that time. They liked those kind of stories. But the truth was, far more than hauling books out of demolished buildings, we collected our books by sitting with people at their kitchen tables as they told us their stories and handed us their books. In the years since, we've, I should say, from the very beginning, I felt a real sense of obligation to the people from whom we collected these books. We were young, and we're dressed in jeans and torn T-shirts, and we're dirty and gritty from head to toe, and somehow they trusted us. They trusted us that we would preserve what they called their Yerusha, their Yerusha, their inheritance. And that was a rather weighty responsibility. And I think we've done a pretty good job of that these past 44 years. We've safeguarded their books, we made them available, and in sharing and celebrating their content. There's been all manner of recognition and awards along the way. I'll tell you just one. Some years ago, we were awarded the National Medal for Library Service, and it was a ceremony at the White House. This was the Obama White House, just to keep the record straight. And Gail and I went down there, and it was Michelle Obama was going to be making the presentations, and there were a bunch of different libraries around the country that had done kind of amazing things. And we went into a kind of, I was going to say a green room, but I think it was red or blue or something like that. And they lined us up, and each of us had a military officer in dress uniform accompanying us. It was all very exciting and a little overwhelming. And it was finally my turn, and they brought me to Michelle Obama, who was enormously tall and very kind. And she kind of bent down, and and I didn't really know what to say to her exactly. I hadn't prepared for that part of this. And I said, my grandmother, when she came to America, if someone had said to her, one day your son's going to be in the White House, she would have absolutely believed that. It was a land of opportunity. Why wouldn't that happen? But If someone had said someday they were going to honor your language, Yiddish, in the White House, that she never would have believed, and no one of her generation would have believed that. Well, I was very flattered about that. So when I said that to Michelle Obama, you know what she said to me? She said, "All things are possible." And seeing a black woman in a building built by slaves as the first lady of the land was really quite an extraordinary moment as well. Eventually, that day was, I said, very stirring. And eventually the book center really kind of arrived in many ways. But right from the very beginning, we had realized that just saving books was kind of the tip of the iceberg. They call Jews Am HaSefer, the people of the book. We are surely one of the most bookish people in history. We venerate books. We keep a book at the center of our synagogues. We, in every way, I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, if we dropped a book on the floor, it didn't matter if it was a Tanakh or it was Norman Mailer, lahavdil. We would pick it up and kiss the book. To this day, I still have to stop myself from doing that because in my occupation, I'd have chopped lips all the time and would never get anywhere. So the question is, how could such a bookish people throw away an entire literature? This makes no sense. And we kind of, over the years, came more and more to understand that and try to address it and to do something about it. Our intent was never to create a geniza, like a storeroom for old books with God's name in them, old Sidurim and Torah volumes. Our goal from the very beginning was to get these books into the hands of a new generation of readers, and we did just that. Except we didn't have enough books to go along very often, until one of our young staff members came to me one day and he said, "Aaron, I think what we need to do is to digitize these books." Well, it's a reflection of how much times have changed that in the early 1990s, I didn't know what the word digitize meant, really. And I had to ask, and he very graciously explained. And we then went to a number of big companies, and we finally arranged to have the books scanned, meaning take electronic images of these at a factory in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. They worked 3 days a week for three shifts a week for 4 years to do this. And then another student came to me and said, "I think the internet's finally fast enough we could put these books online." That was also a novel concept at the time. But we talked to Google, because they had a plan at the time to do just this. That didn't materialize, but they were planning to do this. And they were very happy to talk to us, but nothing exactly came of it. And then one day, the head librarian of the University of Massachusetts Library, 3 miles down the road, came to see me. And he said, "I want you to know I just met with the libraries of all the major university libraries in New England, and we all agree that you can't work with Google." I said, "You all agreed on that, did you?" And he said, "Yes," he said, "Google might be a perfectly benign company." I'm not sure if we're still saying that, but he said, but the idea of one private company controlling all of human knowledge is probably not a public good. And there has to be another way of doing this, and there was a group out in San Francisco called the Internet Archive that had just started a similar project. I see people know about this, on a nonprofit basis, and Brewster Kahle, the head of it, was thrilled to talk to me. We went out to the Presidium in San Francisco and talked to him, and he was so excited about this, and don't forget, we'd already scanned the books. He said, "This is great." He said, "I can have them all online in 2 weeks." I said, "Wow, that's incredible." Well, what he didn't know at the time was that Yiddish goes from right to left instead of left to right. So he found a programmer at Oracle who agreed to reprogram everything pro bono. It took him 2 years to do it. Eventually, the books went online. The Internet Archive kind of believes in an open web, so they don't track their users. So we didn't exactly know who was downloading these books or how many were being downloaded. But I saw in the paper that Brewster was giving a talk at Harvard, which is not so far from us. So I said, "Hey, would you like to have dinner afterwards?" And of course. So we met for dinner, and it was just around Christmas time. And I remember we're in a restaurant near Harvard Square, and we're on the second floor, and we're looking out, and all the lights are twinkling in the snow. It was all quite perfect and quite beautiful. And we had a wonderful meal. And then after the meal was over, I said, "Okay, so how many downloads have we had?" And I don't know what I was expecting, but couldn't have been an enormous number of downloads. How many people still read Yiddish? He says, I'll let you know. And he takes out this gigantic MacBook computer, and he just starts typing away at a furious speed. And for 15 minutes, he's like gone. He's in another space entirely. And finally, he goes, bang, wham, and he hits the return button, and he looks up and he said, I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like 250-something thousand volumes have been downloaded. I could have fallen over backwards. I mean, I was so astonished by this. And I said, really, it just seemed inconceivable to me. Well, during the pandemic, those numbers really exploded. And today, people were home and had time on their hands. Today, full-length Yiddish books from our collection have been downloaded over 5 million times. You know what they say about something like that in Yiddish? They say, "Zoi koch men lokshen." That's how you cook the noodles, right? So, this was kind of extraordinary. Now we're going a step further, because even after all of this, we don't have every single Yiddish title that was published. There were probably about 50 or 60,000 discrete titles in Yiddish. And keep in mind, this is all modern secular literature. This is not ancient literature. These are not religious books. This is modern literature as Jews began entering the modern world and tried to figure out what it meant and how they were going to pull this off. That's what Yiddish literature was chronicling. So we're now spearheading a consortium with the National Library of Israel, YIVO, and the New York Public Library to combine all of our digital holdings into a single online repository that's going to be called the Universal Yiddish Library. We've been working for about 5 years on this, or maybe 7 years on this, and this coming December, the whole thing will go online. And when it does, Yiddish, which was at one point on the verge of extinction, will become the single most accessible literature on the planet. So we've come a very long way. Now I know that's really an accomplishment because you went audible on that one. So that was very good. Good. I really wish I had time to tell you more today because there's so much to tell. I did write a book on this, but that kind of ended 20 years ago, that story, called Outwitting History, but it's still in print, and you have copies, right? So those are available here or online, of course. I'll give you just a few highlights, though, that demand has really exploded over the years. We can't claim any special prescience. However, when the pandemic came, all of our books had already been digitized, unlike most other libraries, and they never went down. One woman, Amber Clooney, a member of our staff, brilliant librarian, worked out of her own home for 4 years to keep those books accessible online 24 hours a day. So the world might have lost many things during the pandemic, but Yiddish literature was not one of them. We realized that a great many people, of course, couldn't read Yiddish in the original, so we started a program to translate Yiddish literature into English. When we began, exactly 2% of Yiddish literature had been translated. 2%, that's all. So out of every 100 Yiddish books, 98% of them were inaccessible to English readers. This was clearly a Herculean task to try to address this. We called a conference of scholars. We took over a publishing venture at Yale University Press. For 10 years, we managed to publish 1 book a year at tremendous expense until and I thought this was really great, until one of our students said to me, "You realize at the rate of a book a year, you got about 39,000 years to go." So I said, "Well, what would you do?" And he said, "That's easy. I would wiki it, let everybody have a crack at it." That was a little overstating it because you got to know a lot. You have to know Yiddish well, and you really have to know English well to translate a book. But we instead started a program to begin training a new generation of Yiddish translators. At that point, everyone we worked with, they were primarily in their 80s, and we started training young people. And Steven Spielberg put up a lot of the money to do that. Steven said to me, he said, "I'm a person who tells stories for a living," he said. "All I have to do is think about what you've got in Amherst." He said, "The idea of all those miles of shelves full of books that pretty much no one alive has ever read," he said, "to me, that's irresistible," and he's been funding that project as a result. We've now trained, it takes a year to do this, and I should just add, the translators don't give up their day job. I just have to be clear about that, right? From this, you can't make a living. But they work very, very hard on it in their after hours. And we've trained probably 120 people so far, all of whom are working on full-length books. And during the pandemic, we launched our own publishing house because the academic publishers were charging too much for the books and the commercial publishers weren't interested. So we started our own press called White Goat Press, the little white goat. The Chlorweiss Ziegler is a symbol of Yiddish literature historically. Anybody know why? It's because in the old country, Jews had very little land. They couldn't own land, so they had very small plots around their houses. But they still needed milk for their kids, and they didn't have enough land for a cow. So the Jews started getting goats, and they could just eat anything, scraps, and they would live in the yard. And it came to a point where if you traveled through Eastern Europe and you saw a goat tethered in front of a house, that, as much as a mezuzah, told you it was a Jewish house. That's why when you look at Chagall's paintings and the paintings of Lansky and many others, there's always a goat flying through the air. That's why that means Jews, was the goat. So we thought that was pretty cool and not anywhere near as commonplace as a menorah or a Jewish star. And so that became our logo. We started this press. In the past year alone, we've published 20 new titles. This is with a staff of 1.5. So we have really come a very, very long ways. And I'll tell you, this afternoon, one of our most recent books is a translation of nonfiction work by Isaac Bashevis Singer that no one had ever seen before, and travels through the Spanish Civil War. And after working for 8 years, we finally finished translating a volume called Warsaw Testaments, the memoirs of a woman named Rachel Auerbach, who was a leader of the Oyneg Shabbos group that buried archival materials underneath the ground in the Warsaw ghetto. And Rachel Auerbach very few survived, and there were 3 people of the group who survived. Rachel Auerbach was one of them. She had been writing journals the whole time during the war, and she had buried her books as well. It took her 1.5 years to get the Jews to dig because they didn't want to be reminded of what had happened. Understandably, the trauma was too great. And they found her documents. She moved to Israel, and she wrote 2 memoirs, both in Yiddish, both almost unread at the time, but they're brilliant works, and Professor Sam Kassow of Trinity University has now translated them after incredible assiduous work, and those books will be coming out in the middle of April, so keep your eye out for that as well. There's a whole lot more to come. We also created a new Yiddish textbook so people could learn Yiddish more easily. The main textbook before that was from 1949. Although it was excellent, it was a little like learning Latin and memorizing morphological tables. Our new textbook is lively and colorful, and you can find that, and that also came out during the pandemic, is now used all around the world. We've started a program called Yiddish School to teach Yiddish to adults. We have an oral history project because one of our staff members said it wasn't enough just to collect Jews' books. We had to collect their personal stories as well. And now we've done that. We've collected several thousand hours of interviews now. And during the pandemic, it came to a screeching halt for about 5 minutes until Krista Whitney, who runs the program, said, I think I could figure out a way to do this online. And she did. And we started recording interviews around the world during the pandemic. And we quickly discovered it was a lot cheaper to do it online by Zoom than to do it in person in Cape Town, South Africa. And so we continue to do that. And then we've just developed or just adopted technology that now allows you to go onto our website. You can type in any word you want, a name of a family, a name of a place, a concept like Zionism, anything you want, type it in there. And every time that word is spoken in thousands of hours of interviews, the computer will find them almost instantly and bring the original video up on your screen to the exact spot where the word is spoken. You know what they call this? A Heinte Welt. This is a modern world, or Mashiach Zeiten is another way to say it, the times of the Messiah, but it's extraordinary what is now possible, and we've been able to harness all of these resources. We run cultural and educational programs of all sorts for college students, to teach Yiddish literature and modern Jewish culture, to college students, to adults, to high school students, to teachers, to rabbis, to writers and illustrators of children's books and so forth. And all of this has taken off as well. People sometimes call us the most optimistic Jewish organization in America. And I get it, you know, an organization that started out rescuing old books that were dusty and tattered that nobody wanted, that should have become, what did the New York Times call us last week? They said we We've grown into one of the most important Jewish cultural organizations in America. The fact that that could have happened really was a little bit of a miracle, and it really did take a certain optimism to pull that off, and the credit goes to all the people I've worked with over the years, because a great many people, you know what they say, it takes a shtetl, right? It does take a village to pull off something like this. And Sid, you spilled the beans, but yes, I am retiring in another year, but not completely. I think I'm going to have a retirement that looks a lot like your retirement. Meaning I'll stay on as a kind of a senior advisor, and I have a wonderful successor in Susan Bronson, a woman I've worked with for the past 15 years, and she's she's brilliant and strong and focused and very eager to take on this work, take on the mantle. But our work will certainly not slow down. In fact, the truth is, we were going full steam as it was, but after the events of October 7th, everything's changed. The whole world has changed. And I knew it the second I heard the news of the whole world had changed. Gail came in and told me what was happening, and I was just, we were both just so heartbroken and staggered by the events. What we didn't know yet, what we'd learn in the next few days, that instead of getting the whole world to rally around Israel and rally around Jews, exactly the opposite happened, and the world sort of turned on us. And anti-Semitism that had been hiding under rocks for years and years and years suddenly had license to come out again. And we all know what's happened now. We know about students in college campuses who are Jewish kids who have to hide in the library, and of kids who are being taunted and pursued. These are really, and let me just add, I'm fully aware of what's happening in Gaza right now, and my heart mourns and breaks for them as well. But right now we have to worry about, in addition, we have, Eina Nili Mili, we have to worry about ourselves as well. And the truth is, it's a dangerous time for Jews right now. And part of the problem is that we simply don't know ourselves well enough to defend ourselves. We don't know our own history. Even kids who go to Jewish day schools don't know their own history any longer. We have a lot of remedial work to do, because you know what happens if you don't know yourself? What happens is that other people, the Sonei Yisrael, those who don't have our interests at heart, get to redefine our history for us and tell stories about us that don't accord with reality. And there's a lot of work to do. Students tell me, well, Israel's just a white settler state. And I said, well, half the Jewish population of Israel is not white. That's the first I've ever heard of that, is what they'll say. Or I'll say, 850,000 Jews were forced to flee 22 Muslim countries where they had lived in some cases for 2,000 years. Never heard a word of that. Somehow we didn't teach it in Hebrew school, it's not taught in public school, and they just didn't know. So we do need to know our history, and we do need to know our culture. What kind of started out as a fun thing to do has become a rather serious endeavor right now, and a serious commitment on the part of a great many people. In Yiddish, a language born of marginality, produced a mighty literature. And although our parents may have swept it under the rug, it's really up to us right now, to every one of us, to get this back and to figure out who we are, and then to face the world again, because there's a tremendous amount yet to be done. So in short, and I'm just about meeting my time limit, right? Doing okay? Good. I didn't even have to consult the iPhone just in case. All right. In short, rescuing in 1.5 million books wasn't bad, but that was just a Vorspeise. That was just a preliminary to what we're really doing now, because there's much more work than just rescuing books. It's a matter of opening up those books and sharing their content and the world they represent. So first, I'm going to encourage you to join us as members of the Yiddish Book Center, but not too strenuously, because it is Shabbos after all. And I'm going to encourage you to visit us in where was that again? Yeah. Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts. We have 2 beautiful buildings that are interconnected, and they're modeled, they were designed by a wonderful architect named Alan Moore, who came from a very non-Jewish family. His family owned the Stanley Tool Company, and Alan was able to take on this project pro bono, and he worked for 4 years, night and day, designing this building, and it kind of looks like a European shtetl, like the old wooden synagogues of Eastern Europe, but inside it's modern and bright and lively and anything but something out of the past. And so I promise you it will make you feel very optimistic about Jewish life to come visit us, especially since we just opened up a major new exhibition, 8 years in the making, that tells the whole story of Yiddish literature as a global culture. So I would strongly encourage you to come visit us, enroll in our courses, tell your kids and grandchildren, organize local programs. We can help with that as well, and join us. You know, Jews have been around for a really, really long time, but we're not done yet, despite all the challenges we face. And with your help, I am confident we can continue to reclaim and to learn and to build and to fight and to do our part to make a better world for everyone for generations to come. Thank you very much. Thanks. Okay, good.
So Aaron's not going to go down. We're going to have some time for questions. I just want to say a couple things. First of all, Aaron, the work you've done, I use old world language. It's Kiddush Hashem, right? I mean, usually the term Kiddush Hashem is what you use when someone is martyred. They say they died al Kiddush Hashem. They died sanctifying God's name. But in the old world, Kiddush Hashem was the highest level of activity, okay? If you do something that honors God, that honors the highest values that we hold dear and cherish, that's what your work is all about, for sure. I grew up in a home where my parents spoke abyssal Yiddish when they didn't want the kids to know what was going on. But my grandparents spoke conversational Yiddish, right? And I just wanted to undo a quick poll here to show what kind of impact you've just had, okay? And I don't even know the results, but I know my community a little bit. I also know we have, how many people here are guests who've come because they were notified about this from the National Yiddish Book Center? How many guests from, raise your hands, okay? Look around. Okay, so welcome if you're new to us. Welcome here. It's glad to have you here. How many people in the community have visited the National Yiddish Book Center already? Wow, okay, that's about half the people in the room. Hands down. How many people who have not been there now are curious to go there? That's the other half of the room. Yeah. So your job has been well done, Aaron, that's for sure. I know Ami Weintraub, I'm going to single you out. She told me that she came into shul this morning. Amy told me that she was, it's so hard for Ami. And Ami, what year was that?
In 2017, after I graduated college, I studied at the Steiner Summer Yiddish program, which is a 7-week free intensive Yiddish program. And then my younger sibling, Naomi, studied Yiddish with the Workers' Circle. And so now we speak in Yiddish so that our parents don't understand what we're saying.
And the young shall lead us. Ami, way to go. I love it. So I'm gonna kick off. We're gonna have a little bit of time for questions, maybe 5 minutes. I want to ask one open question, and then we'll take 1 or 2 questions from the congregation. This could be based on nothing, but I want to kind of verify it. You can either say that I'm out to lunch or there's something to it. When I think about the Yiddish world and Yiddish literature that you stepped into in 1980 when you started your project, my sense was that a large reason that Yiddish had been exiled to the dustbin of history is that part of the Zionist movement was about creating the new Jew. And Yiddish represented the old Jew who was not strong, who was not proud, who was persecuted, and he needed to redefine what Jewish personality and characteristics were like. How much of that do you think is part of the story?
I'll step up to the microphones to answer. So it's a perfectly valid question. It's certainly not out to lunch at all. Okay. But, you know, Yiddish didn't exactly die a natural death. Yiddish was spoken as the spoken language of about 80% of the world's Jews for 1,000 years. So what we're talking about here is not something nostalgic and not something of the past. It's something really quite core to Jewish experience and who we became as a people. But it didn't die a natural death. In 1939, there were 11 million Yiddish speakers in the world. And by 1945, fully 1 out of 2 of those had been murdered. So, you know, these were catastrophic events. In the Soviet Union, increasing persecution under Stalin, Yamach Shemoy, culminated in August 12, 1952, when Stalin ordered the execution of all the major Yiddish writers of the Soviet Union on a single night. So we didn't recover quickly from this. Israel was key to the revival of the Jewish people, but yes, you're absolutely right, Israel tried to create a new Jew, and although at that time, in the early days of Zionism, apart from Theodor Herzl, what language did Theodor Herzl want Jews to speak in Israel? Anyone know?
German.
Not Hebrew? Oh, you cheated, you had a microphone, that was a ringer there. All right, so, yeah, he wanted Jews to speak German. He assumed Jews would speak, that was a cultured language, and that's what Jews would speak, it was his language, of course. That, of course, didn't happen. Most of the founders of Israel, though, Ben Gurion, Ben Zvi, Golda Meir, they were all native Yiddish speakers. And they really had that Sabrechen, the Tzena, you know, to be able to communicate with one another in Hebrew, which was a language that hadn't been spoken for a few thousand years. The revival of Hebrew is miraculous, and not only that, knowing what I know, I would have voted for Hebrew in that context too, only because it really became a true lingua franca. What the Jews of Europe at a time when 80% of the world's Jews were Ashkenazi couldn't have possibly known was how many would be murdered in the Holocaust, and how diverse the population of Israel had become after the expulsion from various Arab countries. So to impose Yiddish would have been chauvinism, and nobody would have advocated that. Well, I would not have advocated that. But, you know, for a long time it was really kind of actively suppressed in Israel as well. Yiddish was very suppressed. Now that's changing as well, and one of our most important partners nowadays is the National Library of Israel. So, you know, the world's always changing, and Yiddish is, well, what did Basheva Singer once say? Yiddish has not yet said its last words. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let me just mention, the most recent book published by the Yiddish Book Center is this Papers of Isaac Bashevis Singer, and there are books available out on the desk. We've made it possible for you, without any violation of Shabbat, to take it and send back an envelope. So we pre-purchased them, so you can do that. There also is a lot of literature from the Book Center on the table if you're interested in becoming a member and supporter. So with that, we'll take just a couple questions.
All right,
Judy?
I got the microphone, and I'm going to cheat. Yiddish is a growing language. There are tens of thousands of households, but we don't interact with them. They're ultra-Orthodox. Are they not literate? Do they not do books? Is that the issue?
That's a really good question, but if you guys want to have lunch, I can only answer it on one foot also. So first of all, it's not tens of thousands. It's
Come back here, two mics. Okay.
Sorry, we're going to go stereo here. 1 second, okay? So it's not tens of thousands. It's many, many hundreds of thousands, and possibly more than that. The Haredi community, which was once a very, very tiny sliver of the Jewish population, well, we didn't even have the word yet, Haredi, of the Jewish population in the United States, is now, well, the Times reported last year that 70% of all Jewish school children in New York City today are Haredi. So the world has changed. If you're all going, wow, how did that happen? It's just demographics. The average birth rate in the Hasidic community is 9 kids per family. And the average birth rate for the rest of us, so let's see, how many do we have? We have 2. So, you know, it's just, and my mother was one of 8 kids. So, you know, things have changed in that sense. And yes, Lubavitch has mostly given up Yiddish at this point. They teach it only because they want people to be able to read the Rebbe's speeches, but Yiddish was incidental for them. But most of the larger Hasidic sects continue to use Yiddish as their everyday language. They don't value Yiddish, it's just utilitarian. But if you saw those TV shows like Shtisel or Unorthodox, I mean, there have been a lot of these of late. The Jews in those shows, if you listen closely, when they speak Yiddish, they're speaking very bad Yiddish. But they were trained to speak bad Yiddish, because the Hasidim are not interested in Yiddish per se. They don't read Yiddish literature as such. But they certainly speak Yiddish, and that's changing too now. One of our very best translators who's working on Chaim Grader at the moment, one of the great Yiddish writers, is a Satmar woman who ended up, after raising her 5 kids or 6 kids, ended up going to Hunter and getting a BA, and then got an MFA from Columbia, and is now a very powerful and a wonderful Yiddish translator. So many surprises yet to come. We have to wait and see what happens. I just tell you one other thing. I once had a professor who said, you know, nobody could have invented Jewish history. It's way too improbable for that. Yeah.
That's great. Matt, I will say that for all the years that you've been our microphone gabbai, you never took the privilege of the microphone, and so you earned that beautifully. And it's a great question. Thank you. Yeah. We only have time for one question. I saw Judy grab one first. So Judy. Oh, beautiful. Okay, you want to yield it to Wicca, please. Wicca, good to see you. Sorry.
Sid, you didn't ask which families here had donated books.
Oh. Okay, let's ask the question.
Which families
How
have
do you
donated
donated
books?
books to the project? Interesting. Wow. Thank you, Wicca. Good.
So my great-grandfather was Morris Rosenfeld.
Really?
Yes, really.
Oh,
And his daughter.
This is a Yichus alert here, so let's
Yeah.
explain who that was.
Wicca, say who Mordecai was. Your grandfather. Say who your grandfather was.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Morris Rosenfeld, who was the poet of the ghetto.
Yes, he was the proletarian poet. He wrote, many. Next time I'm bringing my own microphone too, I can see.
You can
so-
do this if you want.
No, I'm fine. Thank you. I was just joking about that. That's fine. Yeah, he wrote, Choba kleinem Jingele, Zonele, Gott fein, Venichte Zayim Dachsich mir, the ganze Welt is mine. His child, he never gets to see him while the child's awake because he works
Yes.
so long. The man works so hard in the sweatshops.
So
Yeah, he was a very important figure.
can I
so that's-
tell you a small story?
Of course.
So my family lived to be really old. My grandmother lived to be 105.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
She was on the stage with him. Gotta put it closer. Oh my gosh. I need to stand there.
Yeah.
She was on the stage with him at Central Park when the Shirtwaist Factory Memorial was. My great-grandfather had been asked to write a poem about the tragedy, and he was then asked to speak it at the memorial. And my grandmother was a little girl, and she was standing up with him, looking behind his coat, and she told me about it. And she told my daughter about it. So it's never died.
Well, that brings tears to my eyes, and it reminds me yet again that history is not terribly far past. It's much closer, and it continues to shape us more powerfully than we often realize. So thank you for that story.
Go, Ulrich, please. Just wait for the mic for a second, okay?
So, thank you, Wicca, for standing up. I'm Orit, and Aaron was one of my teachers in the quadrilingual school many years ago in Montreal. And I became a Zemmler. I don't know how, but I did. And so I'm the one that writes in the listserv, if you find any Yiddish books, call me, text me. I will either pick up or you could drop off. And I've had very interesting conversations and heard very interesting stories here. And I just wanted to thank you for coming and bringing some positivity to being Jewish today. It's been really hard for me personally, for us, all of us, the whole world. So thank you for bringing that positivity. And just call me and send me Yiddish books too.
Thank you, Irving. Thank you very much.
So way more connections than I even imagined was possible, but that's Jewish life, right? There are not 6 degrees of separation, but only 2 in the Jewish world. And Aaron, you've tapped into something very deep and powerful.
Thank you, Sid.
Yes.
I'll be back after lunch. So
Yes, so
thank
1 o'clock, please come back. Aaron will be giving a second talk about his exploration of Isaac Severage Singer, who we mentioned, the only Yiddish writer to win the Nobel Prize for Literature. That'll be at 1 o'clock. And right now, we'll invite you to turn back to your prayer books for the Elenu on page 445. Please rise.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוסף בראשית, שנתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ. ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד.
May be seated. We take a moment now to remember those who we have lost. Several of you in the circle, I know people who are sitting in the congregation didn't always hear, or don't always hear the names of people who were mentioned for prayer for healing, and several of you mentioned John Peacock. John died last night. John was a very beloved member of this community, and he took ill this past fall, actually on Yom Kippur, is that when his first symptoms appeared, and the last few weeks, some of you might have remembered, John was coming to shul until a few weeks ago, and a couple times stood up and gave this beautiful, beautiful testimony to how much this community meant to him. So we extend our condolences to his wife Paula and his family. The funeral will be here on Tuesday morning at 10:30 in the morning, so I just want you to all know that. We also extend our condolences to our executive director, Rena Milchberg, who lost her father, Sam Convisor, just last week. She's now in the period of Shloshim. We also mark the following yurtzites being marked this week: Katie Kaxer, the mother of Claude Kaxer; Selma Shapiro, the mother of Steve Shapiro; Patricia Ritterhoff, the mother-in-law of Arthur Silver; Victor Shainberg, the brother of Irma Schoen; Mo Septi, the father of Yael Kane; Harold Talisman, the father of Rick Talisman; Stella Danzig, the grandmother of Cheryl Horowitz; Louis Hoppin, the grandfather of Michelle Mellinger; Charlotte Moses, the grandmother of Ellie Schuckman; Saul Bolas, the father of Sandra Yesnowitz; Alan Garrett, the father of Anthony Garrett; and Dee Sennett, the mother-in-law of Sarah Sennett. We invite all those saying Kaddish to please rise for the mourner's Kaddish, which can be found on page 451. Yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, B'yama Divrach Hirutei, B'yamlich Malchutei, B'chayechon V'yomechon, B'chayed Kol Beit Yisrael, B'gala U'vizman Kariv Yimru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Li'olam Ulmei Maya, Yitparach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnasei, V'yitadar V'yitaleh V'yitalal Shemei Dekudisha Brichu, Leila Min Kol Birchata V'shirata, Tushbukata V'nechemata, Tamiran B'yama V'yimru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu V'yal Kol Yisrael V'yimru Amen. Oseh Shalom Ben Ramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom. Aleinu V'yal Kol Yisrael, V'yal Kol Yoshvei Tevel V'yimru Amen. We do love to know who is worshiping with us, especially if you're guests. So, Matt, if you can still stay in your role, and if we can have a second mic as well, we do this more quickly. If you are a visitor or guest to Adat Shalom, we'd love if you simply stand up and say who you are and where you're from, so we can greet you at our Kiddush and know you better, and hopefully this won't be your one and only stop at Adat Shalom. So if you're a guest, please stand up, and do we have a second mic? Aaron?
Rona and Stan Levy. Rona's going to contribute her father's Yiddish books.
And you are from?
Columbia.
Columbia, Maryland.
Here.
Okay, welcome very much. And you're on the board of the Yiddish Book Center? You're a board member? No? Okay, I thought you were. Others? We'll come to the other side in a minute, okay? Go ahead, please.
Hi.
I'm John Welsh. I've been in Washington, D.C. from Chicago for the last 45 years and have the blessing to be friend of Jesse Abraham and his wife Amy and family. And I have received a book of Avram Sutzkever, which Jesse gifted me from the Yiddish Book Center. And I'm delighted to be here and to have made this company.
Welcome, Shabbat Shalom.
I'm a friend of John's, visiting from Portland, Oregon. And
Put the mic near your mic. Mic a little closer. Go ahead.
oh, I'm a friend of John's, and I'm from Portland, Oregon, visiting. I have an actual son and his family who are going to be moving here soon, too. So, Jean Bradley.
Welcome,
So,
welcome.
Thank you.
Pass the mic right behind you. Right behind you. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Barbara Simbel. I'm here from Bethesda, but I've been a member of the Yiddish Book Center since about the time I think that Aaron started it. When he graduated from Hampshire, it's the same year I graduated from UMass Amherst. And so I was very familiar, and this has been a wonderful talk, and wonderful
Beautiful.
time to be here.
So nice to have you. Shabbat Shalom.
I was following the mic. Hi, I'm Sarah Taffy Brown, my husband Jay, and we live in McLean, Virginia. We were invited by our very good friends, Evie and Vic Resmovic, who are members here, and I really enjoyed the talk. I grew up speaking Yiddish to my parents, who were Holocaust survivors, and we donated many, many, many books to this wonderful book center, and my husband and I are finally planning to make a visit in the fall.
Beautiful. Nice to have you with us. Shabbat Shalom. Up here, Shana.
Estelle Deutsch Abraham. I hosted the Jewish Community Radio program in Washington for 36 years. Now it's on a podcast, and I ask you to listen to it. It keeps going. And I have 2 CDs out, Welcome to Yiddish, and it's at the Book Center. They took it, and wonderful to be here with my cousin, Shelley, and love to come here when I can. And I was one of the fortunate children whose parents spoke to them in Yiddish because they loved Yiddish and Yiddish music. And by the way, you can find music at the Book Center as well. Sheet music and music books and all kinds of things like that, when I was there. And we've met before, but you don't remember me, probably from years ago. But I was one of the kids who was fortunate because my parents did not speak Yiddish so that we would not know. They deliberately spoke Yiddish. And they came, one was a Galiciana, one was a Litvak, but it made no difference, and one was a flapper, and my father was more Valentino than Valentino, but they loved Yiddish, they loved Yiddish music, and so I grew up speaking Yiddish and English at the same time. You know, I went to school, I slept on a kitchen, and I slept on a kitchen, and I ate with a couple. I spoke half Yiddish and half English, but I was one of the fortunate ones because my parents loved Yiddish. So it's wonderful to have you here, and so many people who are interested in Yiddish. So welcome to Yiddish.
Thank
It's
you,
wonderful.
Estelle. Thank you, Estelle. Good to have you here. In the back, thank you.
Very, very quickly, love the book, love to talk, love the Yiddish Book Center when we were there. I also want to put in a plug for a place where Yiddish is very alive, Claes, Canada, north of Montreal. There are many people there who speak Yiddish, they teach Yiddish, there's Yiddish music, and it's alive.
Great. And many of our members go there in the summer times. In the back, please. Go ahead, in the back. You have the mic. Go ahead.
My name is Ria Schwartz, and I'm a member of the board of the Yiddish Book Center, and I never get tired of hearing Aaron's story. Thank you for welcoming us.
Welcome. Shabbat Shalom. Good to have you here. Please.
I'm Nina Shore. This is my husband, Bob. We live in Kensington, Maryland. I'm on the board of the Yiddish Book Center. I learned Yiddish, even though my grandparents all spoke Yiddish, I learned Yiddish at the Sholem Aleichem Volksschule in Little Neck, Queens. And when I brought, the first time I could read an issue of the Fovitz, I brought it to my grandmother in the Bronx, and she said, "Who reads that? I read English." It just tells you, you know, the sort of the attitude that has changed. It kind of skips a generation and comes back. So delighted to be here, and thank you for the welcome.
Shabbat Shalom. Over here.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Fine. This is my husband, Henry. We're locals and belong to Congregation Har Shalom. And been involved with the book center for a long time. Two of our 3 children went to Amherst College, so we know the area well, and got involved with the Yiddish Book Center just because I wanted to be able to speak a little bit of Yiddish with I'd been very close to my grandfather and my uncle, who went to school, and the first day of school he came back and my grandmother said, "What did you learn at school?" And he goes, "I learned my name is Jack. It's not Yankel." So They always, so, I wanted to speak, and I took wonderful classes at the JCC with Rochelle Schusterman, who taught Yiddish, and we even did a Passover Seder in Yiddish, which I still have, and it's fascinating because Hashem is not mentioned at all in that. And I also wanted to say that I belong to the book club through the Yiddish Book Center for a number of years. So I have wonderful books in translation that I'm very grateful for. And I think everything that, Aaron, you've done is just amazing. So thank you so much. Appreciate it so much.
Shabbat Shalom, welcome. And your husband, I assume?
Just about the wonderful Passover Seder that you had. This was a Haggadah written in the 1930s by the labor movement, by the socialist labor movement. Yeah. And as Steffi said, the reason that the slaves were able to get out of Egypt is because they organized.
There you go. All right, welcome. They were missing over here. Sorry. Good, please.
Is this on?
Yes,
I
you're
guess
on.
it is. I'm Mitch Gerber, and this is my wife Eileen Reed, and we're from Rockville, just up the road. We are good old friends of Goldie Blumenstick, who I hope is here. There she is. Hey, Goldie. And we actually brought a special book to give to Mr. Lansky if he's willing to be his own Zommler today. And that's all. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom, welcome, welcome. Good to have you here.
Rabbi Sid, could I add one thing too?
Yes.
I just want to say this was a wonderful session, and also now I know the kind of stories that you heard when you go to pick up books. Everyone here had a really wonderful anecdote or history or something to share, so that's really wonderful.
Sean, are you doing the board announcements too? Or